Assalamualaikum and hi. In this video, we will presented about law of logic.
So this is my team MAT, which is 1 FAIZATUL SYARLINNY binti 1 SUHAIMI, SITI KHADIJAH binti Muhammad KHALIL, Nur KAMELIA binti ABDUL SHUKOR, and ERNI NADIRAH binti Muhammad SUFIAN.
Introduction. The law of logic, also called the principle of non-contradiction, says that something cannot be both true and false at the same time. It is a basic rule for thinking and decision-making that applies to many areas like philosophy, mathematics, science, and computer programming. Basically, it means that conflicting statements or beliefs cannot both be right. This rule helps us think logically and make consistent conclusions. There are 12 different types of law of logic, which is double negation law, De Morgan's law, commutative law, associative law, distributive law, idempotent law, inverse law, identity law, domination law, definition of implication, definition of biconditional, and absorption law. Double negation law. This law happens when there are double negation in a statement. Equivalent identities is not P is equivalent to P. The example is not Q is equivalent to Q. De Morgan's law. This law happens when the negation is outside of the bracket. Equivalent identities is not bracket P and Q is equivalent to not P or not Q. Not bracket P or Q is equivalent to not P and not Q. For example, not bracket M and N is equivalent to not M or not N, and not bracket M or N is equivalent to not M and not N. Commutative law. In this law, we have to switch the position but the symbols stay the same. Equivalent identities is P or Q is equivalent to Q or P, and P and Q is equivalent to Q and P. For example, M or N is equivalent to N or M, and M and N is equivalent to N and M.
Associative law. This law allows us to change the position of the bracket and the logical operator must be similar. If not, we cannot apply this law. For example, P or Q or R. Distributive law. This law is the expansion of the individual statement with a group of statements. As you can see, P will expand with Q and R that equivalent with P or Q and P or R. Idempotent law. This law happens when we have the same statement. For example, P and P equivalent with P and P or P equivalent with P.
Next is inverse law. Inverse law of the conditional statement is the negation of both the hypothesis and the conclusion. For the equivalent identities, P or not P is equivalent to tautology, while P and not P is equivalent to contradiction. For example, M or not M is equivalent to tautology, while M and not M is equivalent to contradiction.
So next is identity law. This law of identity states that if a statement has been determined to be true, then the statement is true. For equivalent identities, there are two. So the first is P or contradiction is equivalent to P. Next is P and tautology is equivalent to P. For example, M or contradiction is equivalent to M, and M and tautology is equivalent to M.
Next is domination law. In this junction operator, we need at least one true, then the whole proposition will be true. While the conjunction operator, we need at least one false, then the whole proposition will be false. For the equivalent identities, P or tautology is equivalent to tautology, while P and contradiction is equivalent to contradiction.
So I'll be talking about the definition of biconditional. State that a statement is logically equivalent to the contrapositive. The equivalent identities is bracket P is equivalent to Q, bracket is equivalent to bracket P implies Q, bracket and bracket Q implies P bracket. So the example is bracket M is equivalent to N, bracket is equals to bracket M implies N, bracket and bracket N implies M, bracket. Then bracket M implies N, bracket and bracket N implies M, bracket equals to M is equivalent to M. And now I'll be talking about the definition of implication. The relationship between two propositions which the second is a logical consequences of the first identity. So for the equivalent identities, P implies Q is equivalent to not P or Q. For example, M implies N equals to not M or N. Not M or N is equals to M implies N.
Next is absorption law. The absorption law is an identity linking a pair of binary operations. Here, we need to make sure that the symbol are given and the statement in the bracket is the same one with the closest statement outside the bracket. Equivalent identities, P or bracket P and Q is equivalent to P, while P and bracket P or Q is equivalent to P.
Example 1. Provide the step and reason for each proposition below. The question is, P or bracket P and bracket P or Q bracket equivalent with P. So we apply the absorption law to get P or P, and then we apply the idempotent law to get P.
Okay, so for example 2, provide the step and reason for each propositions below. So the question is P or Q or bracket not P and not Q, or R bracket is equivalent to P or Q or R. Okay, so the first step is by applying De Morgan's law, you will get bracket P or Q bracket or bracket not P and not Q or R bracket. Next, you will apply distributive law, then inverse law, and lastly identity law to get bracket P or Q bracket or R bracket.
For the last example, the question is use the law of logic to show that not bracket P or not bracket P and Q is a contradiction. From the statement, we can use De Morgan's law and get not P and not bracket P and Q. From that, we can see that two symbols of not, so we can use double negation law and get not P and bracket P and Q. Next, we use associative law and we get bracket not P and P bracket and Q. Then, we will use inverse law to get false and Q. And from that, we use domination law, then we will get contradiction. It shows that the statement given is a contradiction.
So in conclusion, there are 12 laws of logic that we need to understand. We need to memorize all of the laws of logic in order to answer the questions easily. Laws of logic will also help us make better decisions and solve problems quickly. That is all from us. Thank you very much.